Thank you for joining us for a series of one-on-one discussions with each of the three candidates who are running for the open seat on the Hingham Select Board. My name is Greg Corbett, and I'm hosting these conversations on behalf of the supporters of the Hingham Public Schools, a nonpartisan affiliate group comprised of Hingham residents who support the Hingham Public Schools. The group currently maintains a Facebook page with over 1,100 members who are active in school and town issues at all levels. If you're interested in learning more about the group, you can find information on Facebook at Supporters of the Hingham Public Schools. We appreciate that the candidates have already engaged in several panels and forums with a more formal structure with opening statements. The intent here is to have a conversation focused on issues relating to the schools. The group has solicited and pre-vetted a number of questions from within its membership, with each candidate being asked the same set of core questions. We've asked the candidates to keep their responses to each question to under 2 minutes. And with that, we will begin our conversation with Select Board candidate Liz Klein. Welcome, Ms. Klein.
Thank you.
All right, so I have some slides so that the viewers at home can follow along with the questions more easily. I'm going to share my screen so we can see the slide, and then I'll read the question, and then I'll switch it back to you.
Great.
So, Ms. Klein, what do fully funded Hingham schools look like to you?
That's a great question. Obviously, this is a term that's been used, which I can certainly appreciate, but it can mean different things to different people. So I think it is important to define it. Fully funding the budget this year meant supporting the school committee and the school board in their efforts to recover from COVID, which I think is critical. We've certainly seen learning deficiencies at every grade level over the last year. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. Some of it will start this summer, and then certainly a lot of work to do to help our students, support our students in the fall. What fully funded means to me, and what I'd love to see ongoing, is everything that we need. And looking at, I'm very excited about the school committee and the school board starting this strategic planning process, because I think it's really critical for us to evaluate what works, what doesn't, and where we want to make adjustments. And as horrible as this past year has been, I think it does give us an opportunity to reimagine education in Hingham. And what was excellent in the 90s and early 2000s isn't necessarily excellent in the 21st century. So I think we have an opportunity to really create a vision for what excellent schools are. And that's what I would like to see fully funded, is that strategy and the budget that's needed to fulfill that strategy.
All right, thank you. So for the next question, I'm going to show you a set of slides before I ask the question. So let me share the screen, and you can look at the slides as I share them here. So this shows two slides that were created by the school department earlier this year in presentations to the select board and the advisory committee, showing that Hingham has one of the worst student-teacher ratios of all of its peer towns. I'm going to move to the next slide. And these two slides show that Hingham has the lowest per pupil expenditure, or among the lowest of all of its peer towns. Hingham Public Schools rank at or near the bottom of its peer towns as measured by several objective metrics, including student-teacher ratio and per pupil expenditure. Do you have a view as to whether the Hingham schools have been structurally underfunded for many years, and how do you propose to address this?
This is a good question, and I know a lot of work has been done by the supporters of the Hingham Public Schools to bring light to this issue. I think it's important to make data-driven decisions. It's important to understand the data points, and pure pupil spend and this student-teacher ratio are certainly important metrics to look at. I think we do need to make sure we're looking at the whole picture and try to understand what's happening. So yes, in some ways that it has been a structural budget deficit, where the the budget is growing at a faster rate than we are typically funding, based on status quo, just continuing as is with the staff salary increases. And we know that when East School opened, the override that accompanied that was not the full amount that was originally requested. So in some ways, we have been working to compensate for that. You're sharing resources, whether it's assistant principals or adjustment counselors or teachers. So I think there is certainly some validity to that, and it's something that we need to look at. I go back to the strategic planning process. I think that will be a critical piece in moving forward in understanding what parents want, what children need, and again, what's working well and what isn't. I think that's critical for us all to kind of reset our expectations and understand what does excellent education mean and really work to strive to get there.
Okay. All right. For the next question, I'm going to show you a couple more slides again before I ask the question. So let me again share my screen. So again, you see two slides. On the left, you see 2020 tax data for Hingham and its 20 peer communities ranked from highest to lowest tax rate. On the right, it's a slide presented at a Hingham Advisory Committee meeting earlier this spring showing tax burden as a percentage to average town income in Hingham. Hingham's residential tax rate is among the lowest of our peer towns as measured by several different metrics, including tax rate by assessed value and average tax bill per average income. How does this affect your view about whether the town needs an override?
These are great data points as well, and certainly our tax rate is low in relative to other communities. So I think it does give us more of kind of a business case, if you will, to an override. There has to be some sort of course correction at some point. And it's important to understand that with Prop 2.5, the override is a critical tool that accompanies that on purpose. That there are it is expected that at certain points, municipalities will need to do an override and increase the tax levy by more than the 2.5%. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Obviously, it should be done responsibly and after other avenues have been exhausted, whether it's state and federal funding, grants, new growth. Certainly, I think where the select board can play an important role in this is new growth. And growing the revenue for the town. That is a critical component. But to answer your question, I do think it's a piece of the puzzle in terms of building that business case for what the budget is and if we need an override. Certainly, as select board, you know, I'm sensitive to people that the tax burden is a lot, even currently. So, you know, as much as we can do to help tax relief for seniors, veterans, and other, you know, other populations that need it, I certainly would like to do that as well.
And do you think we need an override next year?
I think we probably do. I fully support the budget as it is for this year. I think it's a great stopgap. I think it's what needed to happen to, again, get us on the road of recovery from COVID. But to continue with the new staff, as well as, you know, I keep saying this, but I'm really hoping that more comes out of the strategic plan, more than status quo, more than just recovering, actually improving, enriching the educational experience for our students. So I would expect more to be needed. And in that case, you know, I think an override is certainly on the table. One of the things that I would look to do on select board is to work with an override study committee, help define the scope of that, as well as appoint citizen members to that committee to understand what we would need in terms of an override, if that makes sense for the town, and to help educate the entire town and all of the citizens on the importance of that. That's certainly, as you know, a critical piece in getting an override passed is the education of that. And I think people need to understand the value of education and the value of an override so that, you know, people feel like it's what they're paying is aligned with the services they're getting. I think there needs to be that value there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move to the next question here. I'll share my screen again. So this year, for setting the fiscal year 2022 budget and to fully fund the budget as requested by the school department, the town relied on $2.4 million from unassigned fund balance, which is in essence the town's rainy day fund. At the end of fiscal year 2020, the town had over $30 million in this rainy day fund, which was over 25% of the town's annual expenditures. Some have suggested that it is prudent to keep such a high level of fund balance, including that it helps maintain the town's AAA bond rating. Moving to the next slide. However, there are only a small number of towns that actually have a AAA bond rating by Moody's, and most of them keep an unassigned fund balance closer to 10% of total annual expenditures. So my question to you, does the town's fund balance policy need changing, recognizing, of course, that the more money that's tied up in fund balance is less money that can be allocated towards operating expenditures?
Right. So there's a lot here. You know, the unassigned fund balance has been referred to as the rainy day fund. And I think for most of us, we feel like it's been pouring rain since March 2020. So I think it made sense to use money from fund balance for this year. Obviously, we also got federal funding, which helped close that budget gap. I like to think of the unassigned fund balance as emergency savings. It's important to have that savings, but it's also important to use it in an emergency. And this global pandemic, once hopefully in a 100-year event, was an emergency. So I do think that the town financial policy should be reviewed. It is reviewed every 3 years, so it is up for review now. So I definitely look forward to working with advisory committee on that town financial policy and soliciting citizen input. I think that's an important part. I do think the AAA bond rating is important. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. And I think it's important because it represents the financial health of the town. It means we get good low interest rates in good times, not as relevant, right? But it also gives us access to the bond market and low interest rates in bad economic times. And that is when it is relevant, because we have foster school coming. We know the other schools will need to be maintained and updated and renovated in the future. And we can't guarantee what the economic situation will be. So I do think that is important. But a key piece of what you brought up is the town financial policy says that the unassigned fund balance should be between 16 and 20%. And as the slide said, you know, we're at 25%. So there's room there. I don't think we're, you know, at the brink of falling off the edge and losing our credit rating. It's important to be financially responsible and fiscally responsible, but there is room there. So I don't think it should be presented as an either or is my point.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move along to the next question. There are several capital projects currently in the pipeline, partially because we've not invested in infrastructure on a continuous basis in the past. Now there are multiple projects requiring attention, including the Foster School, other schools that need improvement, the proposed new public safety building, the senior center, etc. Do you agree with the order and priority in which we are currently pursuing and seeking to fund these capital projects?
I think that the question brings up the point that we haven't done a great job of preventative maintenance or capital planning. in the past. And I think we can learn a lot from our past experiences, specifically the experience with foster school. So that is something that I am committed to, and something that certainly came up as part of the master plan process, that we need to maintain what we have and do a better job of preventative maintenance. As far as the priority, I think foster school is the priority for the town. It should have been fixed long ago. The issue with that, and I think why there's frustration, certainly I'm feeling it too, it's not happening fast enough, is that we are in the MSBA program, which is fabulous that we're getting state funding assistance, but it means that we're on their timeline. So that's kind of the what happens when you get funding. You know, there can be stipulations and some things that are out of your control. So I think it's good that we're part of the MSBA project, absolutely, and part of that process, but it has slowed down, I think, the progress that we would like to see. But I think foster school is the priority. The public safety building is next. That is also a priority for the town, and that has to happen before the senior center happens. So there is a dependency there in terms of timing and order.
Okay. All right, moving along to the next question. The town is just undertaking a strategic study that will make recommendations for how the schools can improve. Many of these recommendations will take funding to implement beyond the fiscal year 2022 budget that was just recently approved. What do you think the town should do with these recommendations, and how should they fund them?
Sure. So I know I've referenced this a couple times. It's certainly a project that I believe in and very excited about. And I have done strategic planning in my professional career. And it's critical to have a vision and goals. I am hopeful and confident that the school committee and school board will solicit community input to help shape that vision. I think that's a really important part of this process. And then again, identifying what's working and what isn't, and where we can make improvements. So I fully expect that will inform the budget for FY23. I certainly would think that it would. So I think there are some things in that plan that will take money. There's no doubt about that. And there are some things that may not. It may be a reallocation of resources, or some more changes around curriculum, diversity. I would expect there are some things in that plan that don't necessarily take budget. So it will be important to identify that as well and prioritize all of those items, so that we can move forward as a town implementing the strategy.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
That does. Move the next one here. So the Hingham schools are currently performing an equity and inclusion audit that's geared at identifying potential opportunity gaps that might exist and impact students' ability to reach their full potential. How can Hingham be more welcoming for special education students, and what can we do about the stigma against special education?
This is a very important issue. I attended the town hall a couple of weeks ago with the focus on special education, and the stories were heartbreaking, to be frank. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area. So it's certainly removing the stigma, communicating, being more transparent, more accessible, working more collaboratively with parents. I heard everything from, we need a response in our IEP in a timely fashion to, much bigger, more strategic curriculum type issues. So there's a lot to do there. And I have confidence in Dr. Austin, who has a background in special education, to take the lead on this. I think having the administrators within special education, which are included in next year's budget, will help. I'm hopeful that will help continue this along, but there's certainly a lot of work to be done to help our students and give them the resources they need so they don't have to move or go out of district to get what they what they deserve.
Okay, thank you. I've trying to keep to my intent or promise to keep this to about 20 minutes or so. I have one more question for you. So let me share my screen again. What do you think about our current town meeting format and logistics? Do you have thoughts about how we can make it easier for parents to participate in town meeting?
So one positive side effect of the pandemic and doing virtual meetings has been that the level of engagement is through the roof, which is wonderful. And I hope that continues. I certainly encourage the members of supporters of the Hingham Public Schools to get involved, attending meetings, filling out the talent blank application, and getting on town boards and committees. There's a lot of talent in this group, and it's important to have those voices heard and represented on town committees and boards. So I definitely support continuing with Zoom for many reasons. I think it makes it more accessible. It's easier for working parents in general to attend. I love the live transcript. I think that makes it easier for people to participate. So I hope that will continue. There is movement at the state level to continue that past the state of emergency. So I hope that will happen. As you probably know, according to open meeting law, you can't participate this way unless you get a special order from the governor. So hopefully that is here to stay, because I think that's a really positive change. As far as town meeting, I would love for you to be able to participate remotely or vote remotely. I don't think we're there yet in terms of the technology. We're very lucky in Hingham that every citizen has a voice and every citizen gets to vote for themselves. But I absolutely understand that it's difficult, whether it's at night or during the day, weekends, weekdays, depending on your childcare situation, your work situation, that can be very difficult. So I would definitely, continue to work and come up with creative solutions for how people can participate more actively. Certainly the Commission on Disabilities did a lot of work for this past town meeting to make it more accessible, large print warrant article booklets, listening devices, rides, escorts to a special handicap section on the field. So, I think there are a lot of great ideas. I'd love to see sign language. I think there's more we can do to make it accessible for all our citizens.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. And thank you for your time today. Thanks for speaking with me, and thanks for your time and commitment in running for elected office.
Thank you.